Stop recording. So let's just pause.
Hi, do you like real estate and baby goats? I do. I'm top producing agent Spencer Fritz. I thought you were going to throw it. Football season's here, so hire me to be on your team. Omaha! Omaha! Open houses? Yeah, I do them. Farming, I do that too. Online marketing? Yeah, I'm online. Negotiations? Hang on, let me check. Hey, can we get the waterbed? Sweet! Deal's done. More technology.
Okay, so that's just a little video to kind of get things rolling. You know, I don't know how many of you have done videos or have your own kind of videos or testimonials and things like that, but you know, it's a good idea. And what I liked about that is he's kind of quirky, but he's funny. And I think that we have to have some humor right now, especially with what's going on with the economy and the market and the virus and everything else. So anyway, again, welcome everyone. I hope that you can get something out of this training today. I know it's kind of long. It is a core course, so you do get 3 hours of core course credit for this. For those of you that don't know me, I am Cindy Peterson. Used to be Cindy B. Craft. A lot of people knew my name by that because I was Cindy B. Craft for a very long time in the industry. I got remarried, and I've been in the business for 21 years, and I have, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've done a lot of training and put together a lot of Ryan Buffini, peak producer classes, things like that. I really enjoy it. I really, I like to help people so that maybe they can have a better idea of some things that might help their business or that they haven't thought about. And so hopefully today you can walk away with at least a couple of things that maybe you didn't know about beforehand. If nothing else, hopefully it's a little different than what you're used to. I know that trainings can get really boring, especially when you're doing the same type of ones over and over again. So anyway, let's get started. So the secret to change, of the change, is to focus all your energy, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And I think that that's really important for us to follow that advice right now. I was going through and putting this together, and so I had to kind of revamp it just a little bit to match where we're at right now with things, because I had done this PowerPoint a few years back. And so I added some things in here, and when I was doing that, I was thinking, okay, what is a good word that can explain, you know, where we're at, what we need to do, and how we can stay on track and what we're going through as realtors. And resilience came up, and I thought, you know what, that's a great word to explain who we are, what we're going through. So that's the word that is key to brokerages in this adaptive environment. And I really think we do have to be resilient. I think that we have got to be the one in the background that's rooting everybody else on. I think that we have to do that for ourselves. We have to do it for our clients, our family, our friends. And so that means that you're, you know, knowing how to cope with the setbacks and the barriers and how to use your resources. And I think that even though this Zoom, I've only been doing this for a month now, and it still just makes me really nervous. I don't like the fact that I can't see the people that I'm talking to. I can't see reactions. I can't answer questions unless they're, you know, unmuting themselves or whatever. So it's really been difficult for me. And I enjoy it being live because I like to interact with people, and it's a lot funner that way. However, with the times, of course, I addressed this with the division, and I was able to get this online temporarily for the next month or so. And so we could do it this way so that people, while they're off work or staying home, can take these classes. But the one thing that I've really learned from this is that it's kind of weird that we haven't done this before. I think this is kind of going to be the way of things in the future. Hopefully not all the time. We can still meet with our clients and go out and look at homes, and we can, you know, do listing appointments and things like that in person, because I still think that's the best way. However, this has really became convenient, and I ended up doing a listing appointment yesterday with a couple of mine, and we did everything on Zoom just like this. I was able to put together their PowerPoint with all the information. I went over the documents with them. We talked about things. They could see me, I could see them. We had decided that they were not going to have people coming into their home. They don't want that right now, due to the fact that she works at home and she works for a doctor's office. We wanted to just make sure everybody was safe. And so I ended up ordering a really nice photo, video tour, 3D tour that we put on there. And, you know, I had some agents that had already contacted me when I put it on there yesterday evening and said, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. How come we can't get into the house? My buyer doesn't want to write an offer without seeing it. And I just said, you know what, I understand. But for right now, this is what the seller wants, and we're trying to keep everyone safe, including you and your buyers. And I told them, you know what, go ahead and take a look. I understand sometimes pictures are deceiving. However, the thing is that they have their due diligence. If we have 5 or 6 offers coming in from buyers, not everybody's going to get a chance to go through the home. No, but we can look at the offers. And we give them 48 hours after, if we accept an offer, they have 48 hours, they can go in, take a look at the home and see if they still want to continue with the contract. Anyway, I got a little pushback, and then other agents absolutely loved it. And I got an offer last night, and we got an accepted offer this morning. And everything that we've done ever since has been on Zoom, and it's been really convenient. So I do think that this is going to be the new way of some things, and I do think it's a lot better than not meeting with people at all and just sending documentation through Dotloop or DocuSign or whatever you happen to use, because I don't think that people are getting the contracts explained to them well enough, because we started using the DigiSign and things like that. So I do think we have to be adaptive. I think that we have to learn that, you know, whatever obstacles get in the way, we just have to make sure and push through. So this is just one of those things. And leading by example, I think that this has been really good in a lot of ways. I haven't got to talk with people like on here as much as I'd like to, but after these classes I've been doing, I've been getting a lot of people just writing me saying, thank you so much, this really helped, or oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're doing this. You know what, that's all I need. If that's what I get out of this, and I give back my time, and it helps people that are in the same industry as me so we can be better, then I accomplished what I wanted. And so I really do think that, you know, it's, you know, you got to work harder and smarter in some ways, but I think that that's what's going to separate the people that make it from the ones that don't. So talking about that, let's talk a little bit about being responsible. As a responsible realtor, I know that it's really challenging right now. I know a lot of people are saying, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. I don't know, you know, nobody's going to list, nobody's going to buy. And that's not true. That is not the case. It may have slowed down a bit. You may have some people that got spooked and maybe pulled out for now. But all in all, I can honestly say that I have been really busy. I mean, this past month and a half, especially because I'm doing trainings, has really been busy for me. But I've also had a lot of my clients that I've talked to, because I've contacted them. I contact them and see how they're doing and see if they need anything. And that's when I explain to them how we can handle situations if they decide they want to sell or buy right now. So being responsible, you know, probably not a good idea to go knock on people's doors right now and try to hand out things. I just don't think that's smart until all this is lifted and it kind of eases up a bit. You know, don't hold live buyer seminars or group gatherings of any kind if you can help it. That's just not a good idea. So, and most of us already know that. We've had to eliminate that. You can work remotely and stop holding open houses if that is what your sellers choose to do. If they choose not to do that, I would say just make sure that you're educating them really well on the things that need to be done. And most of all, don't panic. Keep them calm. We'll get into that a little bit about showings and things like that. But I wanted to bring up, since I'm talking about the Zoom meetings, something I wanted to point out that maybe people haven't thought about is that personal video emails can be really good at strengthening relationships. I've been doing a lot of this with my grandbabies and my kids because I don't get to see them as much as I want to because of all of this. But I've also been doing this with my clients, my past clients and friends and family too. Mostly just to get on there and just say, hey, how are you doing? Giving them a call or a text and saying, I'd really like to chat with you for a few minutes. Is there a chance we can jump online at this time? And, you can have multiple people on there. And there is other systems that you can use besides that. I mean, there's Duo, there's Facebook. I mean, there's just so many things that you can do this through that don't cost you any money. But what I found is that one thing that is really interesting that you may want to think about is if you work with for sale by owners, or if you don't and it's time to get started to do that, if you pull up for sale by owners in your area within a 10-mile radius of your area, say on KSL.com, you will be surprised how many for sale by owners there are out there. I know there's not a lot of signs that we're seeing, but I know that they are putting them on different sites and stuff like that to get them sold. If you got a hold of them people and just said, listen, I understand, that you're trying to sell your home. Mostly what I want to do is I'd like to see your home. If you can, maybe give me a tour of it. I don't know if we can do a Zoom meeting and you can walk me through your house so I can take a look at it for any potential buyers I may have. Or if nothing else, you build a relationship by telling them, hey, you know what, I want to make sure you're staying safe during this time. I've got some flyers. I got things that you can have that would help as far as, signs you can put up, ideas for them, different things for open houses to keep them safe and things like that. But I think it's really neat that if you were to ask them if they could join you on one of these video emails and stuff, I think that you will find that you'll build relationships better with people and you have a better chance of getting in their home and in the future and maybe even listing their home. So. And the new normal for pros is, the age of Corona. Sorry, I got to shut my door. My dog came in. He wants to join me. The 360 tours, like I was saying, are really, really big right now. And honestly, I think they're great no matter what. And they link to all the different websites and things like that. And so, but the buyers are relying on us more than ever for guidance in this during the coronavirus. And I think that this is the best way to do that. They have apps that you can download. They can do the 360 tours. Even if there's an option that you go out as the agent and you can walk through the home, make an arrangement with the seller's agent to walk through the home and take videos or even, pictures, whatever you got to do. It's a good time to do that. Most of all, just keep calm and take care of yourself. I know a lot of people are stressed out right now and they have reason to be. It's really hard to know what's going to happen with the market. We don't know, you hear different things. And if you listen to the news all the time, you're going to be stressed out because they're just always going to be telling you things that either aren't true or they project that they might happen, things like that. I kind of try to stay away from the news the most I can because it makes me stressed out to no end. So when we're talking about salespeople, of course, there's all types of different salespeople. There's experts, there's closers, there's consultants, storytellers, focusers, narrators, aggressors, socializers. You know what? It's great to have a little bit of all of that. And it's great to have people that are all different types because there are a lot of clients out there that need a different type of personality. Not everyone fits with mine. I mean, I'm outgoing, I laugh, I giggle, I make jokes and stuff, and that doesn't work for everyone. So what type of salesperson are you? Ask yourself that, you know, what type are you? And is there areas that you might need to improve in that might help you a little bit? And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes. But as far as the market goes, like I said, it's hard to respond. You guys are welcome to unmute yourselves and respond if you want to. This is based off of when I had my PowerPoint put together, you know, prior to all of this happening. But, you know, sellers or buyers market, you know, it's still a strong market. There's still a lot of building going on. There's still buyers out there looking. I'm hearing that there's multiple offers still going on with a lot of things. So, you know, I don't think that we're going to see a slowdown that much. Is it going to be like last year? Probably not. Home prices increasing or decreasing? I'm not sure if any of you want to jump in here. You're welcome to, but I have heard from quite a few agents now that a lot of appraisals are coming in low, that they're coming in sometimes $17,000 to $20,000 lower than what they were just, you know, months ago. And so be careful when you're working right now. It's really hard to tell. You don't want to overreact and you don't want to underprice, but then again, you know, you have to be realistic. So if you're doing market analysis for people and they're coming in 5,000 lower than they did a month or two ago when you did one, you know, you want to really be cognizant and make sure that you are getting the numbers that work and that you're not panicking and that you're not causing them to panic. We don't want them to think, oh my gosh, everything's going to fall apart. But on the other hand, we want to educate them the best we can. So make sure that you're not overpricing properties 20,000 higher than what the comps are coming in at, because they're just not appraising right now, most places. So I'm not going to say everywhere's like that, but I have people on here across the whole state. So I'm just talking about in my area where I'm at. I'm in little old Roy City, but you know, I know that it's different for everybody, but just educate yourselves. New construction, you know, it's still growing. As far as I can see, they're just still going crazy. Interest rates, of course, we all know they're down to nothing, which tells me that, you know, even though we're kind of scared of what might happen or whatever, if you've got clients out there that you've worked with in the past and you're not contacting them to check in on them, I highly suggest you do. Follow up with them. If they're struggling right now, let them know that now's a great time to refinance. If they're not in the market to sell their home right now, they can tell them, you know, refinance it and get a lower rate. And maybe even, you know, if they wanted to pull out some cash to kind of help them through these hard times or whatever, that's their decision. But, you know, educate them and give them information of some lenders that they can work with to get that done. Inventory, it seems like inventory is still pretty low. And I think that we've had some people pull off the market. But it just, again, depends on what area you're in. People are always going to buy and sell homes, no matter what the economy is doing. So don't give up. So lazy is a very strong word. I like to call it selective participation. And so this is the results of an easy market: poor communication, less follow-up, less marketing, discounts replacing value, less attention to detail, and less effort being taken. The reason I bring this up is because I really am hoping that if we haven't learned anything through all of this past month and a half of what's going on, I hope that we step back as realtors and we really think about the type of business that we do and have been doing. Whether you've done one deal or you've done 100 this last year, I really think that it's important to take a step back, and right now is the time to do that. That's why I think it's important to be getting all your CE credits in, getting all of your contact management databases up to date, sending out mailers, following up with clients and things like that. The one thing that I think that we have lost over the past few years when the market has just been crazy busy is I do think that we've lost communication with people. People just don't communicate like they used to. Everything's through text and email. A lot less follow-up has to be done. A lot of times because we're getting multiple offers, so you're just taking what you get and it's going so quickly, you don't really have to follow up. Possibly even less marketing is going on. People that are listing homes or putting them on the market, and like mine, it went under contract overnight. It doesn't mean that we don't still need to market it. I mean, I still paid for 360 tours and all kinds of things that cost me money right up front, and I'll continue to do whatever I have to do. But I do think that has been an issue over the past few years. The big one is discounts replacing value. It's really hard to compete sometimes when you get brokerages and agents that want to reduce. And I'm not saying, hey, you know what, there's not cause for that sometimes. But I will tell you that people will pay if they feel like they're getting the value of what it is that you're selling them. And if you don't know what your value is, it's really hard to sell somebody on it. So I would hope that right now is a time that you start really thinking about some things that will help you. My Turning Thoughts into Action class that I do, the other CE class that I've been offering, talks a lot about that and the things that you can do to change that and make things a little bit differently so that you can replace those discounts with a lot more value, so that when you go out to listing appointments and you're talking with them and negotiating with them and trying to get a listing and they start asking you to discount or ask you why you're better than somebody else, I would hope that you know why you're better than somebody else. And if you don't, do some research on your company that you work for and what they have to offer, and ask yourself, why is it better than another company? What's better about what you have to offer than what they do? Again, less attention to detail. I think that a lot of detail gets left out nowadays. I think that people are skipping through contracts. I think that they are listing homes and they're not looking into all of the details that need to be on the MLS. They're not following up when they write the offers to make sure all the documentation's there that they need. Tax ID numbers are correct, just all of those kind of things. And it takes less effort when it's a busy market and you're getting a lot of people that are making offers and you're getting multiple offers all the time and stuff. You're not having to do quite as much work. But I believe that's something that's going to be changing. And I think that now's the time to get yourself set up for that. So we all know that the market can't continue the way that it has over the past few years. It's been, you know, absolutely amazing. I mean, people have just been crazy busy. And, you know, good for us that we finally had it catch up to where we can all do that. However, with everything that's going on right now, we know that that's going to change. It has to change somehow. It already has changed. So start thinking about that. And while you're getting ready for when the market jumps back and when we really get back to work and we start to going back to our offices and going out on appointments and actually meeting with people in person, think about what type of an agent you are. Think about, are you a transactional or are you a relational type of an agent? Is it all about the transaction for you? Is it all about as many listings as you can get, as many buyers as you can get, as many as you can get closed? I mean, we all want that, but is that all it is to you? If it is, I suggest that you start thinking about the relational side of that. Because once you build a relationship with people, they will continue to, if they trust you and you do good by them, they'll continue to use you and they'll continue to refer you. If they don't, then you've lost out because you've already done a deal with somebody that already trusted you. And if you're not getting them back again and you're not reaching out to remind them that you're here, then, you know what, I forgot to give you guys your code words. All right, sorry, we're gonna pause for a moment. I need to give you the code word. So the first one is educate. So hopefully you can all hear me. The first word is educate, and I won't be able to repeat them, so make sure you write them down. I apologize. I got going and I forgot. I don't have my little helper here today to remind me. So anyway, so how would you rate yourself, and how would you, what rating would you give yourself for the service that you're providing? That's a good question to ask yourself. And you know what, if you're not asking yourself, I would be asking your past clients if you don't do reviews and things like that where they can send in an evaluation of how well you did. It's a good question to start asking. What would they give you as a rating? And, you know, what would you rate your level of knowledge? I think that that's probably the main thing that we have to really, you know, concentrate on is we can all do the same type of things. Sorry, I've got somebody chatting here. Nice. So Carrie said current clients 10, past clients 5. I'm not sure what that means. I'm assuming that probably means that that's what you have going right now. Is that right? If it is, good for you. That's awesome. And And then how well do you communicate and educate your sellers? So not only educate yourself, but you need to know how to educate your sellers. And I think that that's something that a lot of people struggle with because we hate getting asked questions for things we don't know an answer to.
Hey, Cindy, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I needed to follow up on that because I didn't want you to be like, what is she talking about?
That's okay.
So when I have a current client, I'm a 10 for sure. I'm super engaged in helping them out. It's the ones that I have a hard time maybe following up on and doing those phone calls and saying, how's it going? How are you doing? So that's what I was meaning by that.
Oh, good. Thank you. And you know what? You're welcome to unmute and just throw that in there anytime. I love hearing from you guys.
Hey.
Sometimes I sit here and wonder if I'm talking to myself, if I lost everybody.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we just recently had a little bit of extra time in our office. And so because we had a little bit of extra time, we thought it would be really fun. We bought some little seed packets and we bought the little thank you cards that you can buy anywhere. And we sent out a bunch of those to our past clients just with a little thing to brighten their day, because we thought flower seeds, it's spring, everybody's doing everything in their yard, right? So we sent out flower seeds. Oh my gosh, we got the sweetest messages back, text messages, phone calls, emails. It was just amazing. And I only did 30 of them, but I'm gonna go back and do my entire database because it was such a cool, rewarding thing. And this is a good time to respond to people and just reach out to them and say that.
That's great. It really is. And so I'm curious, have you done the Buffini program?
Give me 1 second. Yes, we've done the Buffini program. I've done Blitz. I've got another Blitz box ready to go. And I've always worked by referral, and I just love doing that. It's really fun to keep in touch with past clients, and then they know that you really care about them.
That's right. Yeah, that's why I asked, because most of the time when people talk about that they're getting things like that together and they're sending them out, most of the time I find out that that's coming from they went through Buffini and they swear by it, and I do too. I really think that that's important, that you keep it very personalized and sending out personalized, cards, even if it's just something small, going down, like you said, I went down to the dollar store, before and just bought $200 worth of little plaques that can go in their garden that says something about friends, or depending on the holiday or whatever it happened to be. We call those pop buys in the Buffini world. You can pop by and give them to people, or you can send them out whatever works, but at least we're doing something. It is a good time to do that. And right now, I don't know about you guys, but with you doing that, I'm going to assume, because I've been doing that same thing too with mine, not as much as I want because I've been so busy doing the classes and stuff, but I plan on getting it done. If you haven't been doing it recently, I know that when I've done it recently, I've enjoyed it, and it's meant so much more to me than it even did before, because of what everyone's going through. So yeah, people will appreciate you reaching out to them and just so they know that you're there and that you care. And it's not always about calling to say, hey, you ready to list your home, or hey, are you, do you know somebody that's buying or selling? That comes with that. So great. I'm glad to hear you guys say that you're doing that. And it's good to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Can I throw in one more thing? Don Zimmerman said, I told him that I had done it, and he said that even if you just did a simple card that just said, hey, I was just thinking of you, have a great day. It can be that simple, and it will make somebody's day, because all of a sudden they realize they're still important to us.
Yeah, exactly. People, you don't get much in the mail anymore, unless it's junk mail or a bill. And so when people get a written out card that's sent to them, that's personalized to them, and they get to open it and see that you're writing to them and that you care, it really does make a big difference. It has a huge impact, and it makes a big difference in your business, that's for sure. So, well, thanks. I appreciate you guys throwing that in there. It's nice to have somebody else talk besides me. Okay, so what does it take to have a successful career in real estate? We all know that you got to have some kind of a business plan, and we talk about that. We go to seminars, they tell you all the things that you should do, and then we don't always do it. And so I would strongly suggest, if you don't have a business plan, of something written down that you can put together, and maybe even have a coach or have your broker or somebody that can sit down with you. so that you can put it together and you have something in writing, and then you can have somebody behind you that's kind of pushing it along and saying, hey, how you doing? Sometimes that's what we need, is a little push. You know, listings. A lot of people that I talk to, it really surprises me how many people say, I don't do listings. They're hard to get. I'm not very good at it, but I like to work with the buyers. And when I first got in the business, I was told from the very beginning, if you don't list, you don't last. And so I really believed that. And so I really always focused on the listings, because I knew if I got the listings, I was definitely it would bring some buyers. And people do have preferences, and that's okay. What I would say is that if you don't do a lot of listings, but it's something that you would like to work on it now. Get working on it. Again, I have my thoughts into action class that I talk about that, and I talk about ways to get listings, who to contact, how to contact them, what to say. So if you haven't signed up for that class, you're welcome to sign up for it. If you don't need the CE hours, I do have a YouTube channel that you guys can watch these on as well afterwards, and I will pass that on to you when I send out your certificates and stuff, so that you can access it. Even this one from today, after everything is said and done, this will be on my YouTube channel. I'm just going to be honest, I just put it together like a week ago, and I'm not great at it. And I still am trimming some of them so that we don't have so much talking in there of things that don't matter. But I've had a lot of people looking at them that have really liked it, so they could follow up or watch them if they didn't get to make it. So work on listings. If you haven't done that, you know, practice with your own home, and put together listing plans, whatever you got to do, market analysis on your own house, your friend's house, whatever it takes. And then buyers, same thing. Work with your buyers, put together some buyer packets, and find a good mentor. If you don't have somebody if you're a newer agent, or maybe you haven't done a lot of business, haven't had somebody that's kind of carried you along, I would strongly suggest that you find a mentor that you can follow. It makes such a difference. And, you know, another thing is, people sometimes always focus more on a higher commission split. And I'm not going to say one's better than another. What I will say is that 100% of nothing is still nothing. If you aren't doing any business, it doesn't matter what your commission split is. If you take something that is a higher split, but you know you're not going to get the help you need, you're really hurting yourself. That's where mentorship comes in. That's where training comes in and things like that. Now's a good time to take a look at where you're at and decide if where you're at is where you want to be and where you want to stay. A lot of people are making changes right now, going to different companies or whatever they need to do. And, you know, it's probably better now than later if that's the case, and you're not happy where you're at. But definitely make sure that you're getting what you're paying for. If you are paying a higher split, you're paying a split to the brokerage and you're not getting as much, you know, make sure you're getting back what you deserve. Marketing and advertising, same thing. Make sure that you are looking into marketing and advertising that works for you. There's so many free things out there that you can get. There's pro agent websites that you can get for free. You know, you don't get as many things on there, but at least you can have something that doesn't cost you much. There's just so much that you can get, and marketing and advertising right now is the best time to get all your stuff ready. I'm talking even months down the road for when if you start deciding, hey, I think we're going to do a Christmas, hopefully everybody can be back to normal at Christmas. We're going to do Santa Claus, and Thanksgiving, we're going to, you know, give out pies, or we're going to have a get together. We're going to have a client appreciation event or whatever. Now's the time to really be thinking about that. Think ahead of your future. Because I will tell you that all these people that kind of get stuck in the now moment, that have been busy with buyers, it's just going crazy. All of a sudden, what's going to happen is that's going to slow down, and you're going to be going, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? And you're going to end up probably going inactive because you just didn't have a plan. So make sure that you're thinking about future and not just right now. Update your CRM. If you don't have one that you're using, use Google. You can use your Gmail, and they've got contacts and everything in there that you can use. Let's see. You can do your own Google pop buys, ideas for pop buys, and Pinterest and things like that. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Sorry, I'm just trying to read, make sure I'm not missing any comments, but I'm assuming you guys are watching the comments as they come in. Like Melody and them, whenever they're writing something, they're putting that out to everybody. So make sure you're reading your chats too. It's a good way to interact with other people on here. All right, for some reason it's not moving. Okay, all right, so if you're not working on anything right now, you're probably procrastinating. And if you're procrastinating, you're not going to get anything done, because wherever you are right now, if you don't make a plan and move forward, that's where you're going to be a year from now. So good time for a break. But before we go to break, I want to give you another code word. Next code word is keep calm. 2 words, keep calm. I'm going to go ahead and play this video for you guys. Good time to grab a drink or go potty if you need to, whatever. But I'm going to go ahead and play the video for you.
This morning I got up and got ready quickly because I had to get a lot of stuff done. I sat down at my desk to start getting my stuff done, and I spilled my coffee, so I got a sponge to clean it up, and I figured I'd take an extra minute to clean the whole desk because a clean desk would help me get my stuff done. When I was finished, I realized I hadn't eaten anything and I didn't want to be hungry while I got my stuff done, so I went into the kitchen and I was out of cereal. When I got to the grocery store, I remembered a bunch of other crap I needed to get, and I figured I was already there, so I did my shopping for the week so I didn't have to worry about it while I got my stuff done. When I got home, I didn't feel like cereal anymore, and so I made an omelet and I did the dishes so I wouldn't have to do them after I got my stuff done, and then I went out to get some oil from the hardware store because my desk chair is kind of squeaky and I didn't want to be distracted by a squeaky chair while I got my stuff done. When I got back, it was getting kind of late and I knew I wouldn't be able to get my stuff done today, so I started watching the Twilight Zone marathon on TV. I just have to make sure I get to bed early because I want to be well rested tomorrow so I can get my stuff done.
Okay, so we all have been there, right? I know that a lot of people I talk to right now are saying, oh my gosh, I just don't even know where to go, what to do. I'm not really sure if I should go get a job or start looking for something else. I don't know what the market's going to do. Most of all, I will tell you that a lot of that is because people procrastinate, and we've been putting some of this stuff off for a long time. I will admit that I have not kept up on my CRM the way that I should have. And over the past, month and a half, I've really been going through it, making sure it's updated, sending out cards, text messages, and calling people from my past clients just to update emails and phone numbers and things like that. So kind of just a funny little video, but I thought that, it kind of applies. We all feel that way. Reminder to yourself, you can't give what you don't have. So if you are not prepared or you have not educated yourself, you can't give that out. So when we talk about value, make sure that you know that you're worth what you believe you're worth, and how much you go out there and you get that knowledge and make sure that you pass on to your clients. We don't just sell real estate. You sell yourself every day to whoever you're around. So whether that's your family, your friends, your spouse, say you work another job, you're selling to your other employer or whatever. People have to believe in you, and you don't get that unless you believe in yourself. So plan ahead and be prepared to be educated. So if you don't understand representation, I suggest that you really look into that. I know that they have the new mandatory residential CE class that everyone has to take now when they renew. I'll just throw it out there. I just got the division to approve that online as well. And my good friend Brenda Nelson actually already had the class put together. And so she's letting me use her materials, and I will be offering that class start next month. So if you're going to need that class in the next few months, you can take that one online as well, but it'll probably only be till the end of May that they're going to allow me to do that. That's just an FYI. The reason I say that is because the representation is a part of that. It's a big deal in that class. Appraisals versus a CMA, know the difference. Do you know what they are? Do you know how to explain a CMA to your clients? If you don't, I suggest you take some CMA classes through the MLS. They have a lot of videos and things like that. Of course, fair housing, want to make sure that you're understanding fair housing. I will tell you that if you want to stay out of trouble when you are putting listings in and you're making remarks on there, if you just describe the house and not the people who might be living in it, you'll probably always be okay. A lot of people want to try to say, you know, great starter home for young families, or, you know, senior living, or, you know, just things that are focusing on a particular group of people or individuals is not a good idea. So just describe the property. Multiple listing service, again, make sure that you understand that you're entering everything in the MLS that needs to be in there, and you're reviewing the information as you put it in. A lot of people get into trouble because they don't do that. They just put it in and then find out later that they've actually put something in there. Clear up their wording, very out of focus. Is that slide hard to read? Sorry, if you have the handout, you should be able to read it off the handout. Otherwise,
Blurry, but I can still read it.
okay, yeah, I'm not sure why it does that. It seems like the more people I get on Zoom, the harder the stuff is to read and see. That's kind of what I've decided. Because I've got my other monitor over here, I can see that it is a little bit blurry on that one. I'm not really sure why it's doing that. I think it's probably because I've tried to blow up the words so you could see them better, and maybe that's the reason. I'll have to change that. Okay, so then safety and showings. This is the one thing that I preach and preach and preach. Every single class I teach, it doesn't really matter which one it is, I talk about safety and showings. And I think right now more than ever, we really have to make sure that we are educating our sellers and our buyers on the risks, first of all, of COVID-19, of course, but then there are a lot of other safety issues that we need to be talking about. We will get into a few of those things. Disclosure and inspections, make sure that you understand those things. I'm going to stop right there for a minute and give you guys another code word. Does anybody have any questions for me at this point or comments? Nope. Okay. All right. So your next code word is procrastinate. So you don't have to spell it correctly. If you don't know how to spell it, just try your best, but it is procrastinate or procrastinating. So we just watched the little video about that. All right. So when I put this PowerPoint together a few years back, obviously you can tell when you're looking through here, you'll be able to see the difference. This is, hopefully, can you guys see this okay? Oh, that's really blurry, huh? You guys can't see that at all. Let me see. I don't know if that's going to make a difference. Does that make any difference? Oh, it doesn't.
No.
I don't know why it's doing that, you guys. I haven't had that problem before, but I can see what you're talking about because I've got a screen behind me that I can look at that's online. Okay, well, darn it, I'm just going to have to read it to you then and tell you what it says. So basically, this is listing appointment details. I'm going to just tell you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller at 1234 Love My House Street in Plain City have a ranch style home, no basement, 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths, 1660 square feet, 1/3 of an acre, 2-car garage, fully landscaped. It has no fence, no RV parking, and it has the original mauve carpet. You don't have to remember all this stuff. I'm not going to test you on this. So just so you know, you don't have to be writing it all down. This is actually just kind of to go through and get your input on some things. The seller purchased this property 3 years ago for $205,000, which we all know that even 3 years ago it would have been higher than that. But we're just going to go off of what we have here. For $205,000, they owe $190,000, and they're wanting to ask $275,000, but the taxes on are $1,425, and they want to move in August, and they are now wanting to list. The listing appointment is taking place in June, the end of June. Okay. This seller is the sister of your best repeat customer. They are not willing to pay more than a 5% commission. They don't want a lockbox on the home. They're for beautiful four-legged child in the home, is old, but he tends to leave little brown presents on the floor often. Did I lose? I must have lost somebody maybe. Hopefully we didn't lose somebody. Somebody just popped off there. And they want to exclude the shed. There's a shed that's a 10 by 10 wood shed. And they want to be home when the house is shown. So with all the things I just named on there, any comments or opinions about how to handle this certain seller?
One of the things that I might try is to ask them what they expect of a seller when they are out looking, and what they expect when they're looking at homes. What do they expect that seller to do and make available? Because sometimes they have to see it from a different perspective.
That's great. And that's so true, because so many times when we're working with people, I went to a listing appointment just a few weeks ago, and it's a beautiful home. It's very nice. It's an older home, and they designed the home. They've lived in the home the whole time since it's been built, and so they have a lot invested. They really love their home. Problem is that they love their home. They love everything about their home, even the things that are kind of outdated or maybe not up with the times. The problem is that the value they see in that home is the value they're comparing to new homes. And a lot of times when you're working with people, of course, they do love their home. It's their pride and joy. And they think it's worth a lot more than what maybe a buyer would, because they have so much invested. But what we have to understand is, like she said, you have to turn it around so that they can understand the other side. I think that a lot of times agents are afraid to lose a listing because they don't want to say, I understand where you're coming from, and I can understand that you have some concerns about this or this or this. Let's just talk about, for instance, them not wanting to have a lockbox on the home. How important is it that we tell them how that works? I think a lot of times agents put a box on the home, and a lot of times they don't even put the secured lockbox on there that's approved through the MLS. And they're doing a mechanical box that's got, the numbers you can spin, and it just pops open. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I have purchased quite a few of the super boxes because I like that I can track who sees the home. I know how long they're in the home. I can schedule what time that lockbox is available to open. So it's kind of a security measure. Plus, I know if they're interested. If they're in and out in 6 minutes, they had absolutely zero interest. If they were there for 61 minutes, which I just had one that was there for 61 minutes, there's some definite interest going on. So it's kind of like my secret agent tool.
It is a good tool. And I understand maybe there's situations where you've got to have the mechanical box on there for, I guess, one reason or another, maybe with new construction or something like that. My concern with that, with people that are putting them on homes and not thinking about the fact that somebody could not put the key back, that somebody could leave it open so somebody could walk up and get the key out that doesn't even belong there. And you can't track who's going in and out of the house, even at night. That, to me, is such a security issue that it's a liability to the agents. And I understand that the super boxes are expensive. They're not cheap, but we make a lot of money when we sell these homes. And if you can't take $105 or whatever they are right now out of your closing and go buy one or two of those every once in a while, so you have them available to you, then you have to really do that. Question what your motives are. Question how much it means to you to be taking care of your clients. When you can lock out a lockbox, you can put a call before showing code on there so people can't get into it. Mine lock out at like 8:30 or 9 o'clock p.m. and they don't open again until 8 or 9 in the morning, whatever it is that we decide with the sellers. It is really dangerous to not have something in there that we can keep track of. So I highly suggest, if you're still using mechanical boxes, on homes and people live there, I would be very careful about that. That's just a lawsuit waiting to happen. And God forbid something happens to the people in the home. I just don't know how in the world you would ever, I just don't know how you would ever say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Or, you know, I didn't mean for that to happen. You know, that just doesn't happen. And so the other things with this is, again, the reason I bring this up is because we hear these things from sellers, right? I mean, they're certain things that they're going to want. Sometimes they're not realistic. But the main thing is that we have to really think about when they are making comments saying they're not willing to pay more than 5% commission, or, you know, they don't want the lockbox on the home, or you got to talk to them about their puppy that's leaving poop on the floor. Whatever it happens to be, you have to address it and you have to be tactful. But most of all, people normally don't have objections, they have concerns. If you can repeat it back and ask them why it is they feel that way, and understand and listen to what they're saying before you respond, that makes such a difference. And so I think as realtors, we have to remember that we're not just here to try to sell. We get in that mode sometimes where we go on a listing appointment and we're so used to doing that, or we're sitting with the buyer and we go through the contract so quickly because we know it so well. And we kind of sometimes feel like maybe they're feeling a little fidgety because it's taken too long or something like that. You know, it does make you a little bit nervous because you're trying to make them happy. But on the other hand, you know, I think that it's important that we make sure we're explaining everything to them. So this is just a CMA that I had done on this, and it's going to be just probably hard for you guys to see this anyway. But the reason I had that there is because you can see on this that, if you can see it, that the price came in at $238. They were wanting to ask $275. My point here was just to make sure that you have a way of understanding how to explain to them why the market doesn't pull that kind of value and how you would do that. And then you have to decide, you know, are they realistic? And if they're not realistic, are you still going to list the home? You're just going to give it some time to see what happens and hopefully they come down? Or are you just going to walk away and say, you know what, I don't want you to be mad at me in 3 months when it hasn't sold and we haven't had anybody here because we're $30,000 overpriced. That's something that you have to decide. So this is basically just something that I threw in here that you guys are welcome to. I sent you the templates as far as on the handout. If you decide that you want a copy on some of these things, so you want to use it in your presentation for your sellers or something, please email me back and let me know, and I will get those out to you as quick as I can. It's kind of been crazy lately. I haven't been getting back to my emails as fast as I had hoped, but you know, if I can help you out or you'd like to include any of this into your own personal stuff or make it your own, I would be happy to send it to you. So when you're explaining the listing price and how do you come up with that to your sellers, make sure that you're explaining the current market, you know, local, you know, the conditions, comparable homes. There got to be comparable homes. They got to be, if it's a Rambler, it's got to be compared to a Rambler. The buyer availability for the properties, you know, you've got to know these kind of things and the proceed considerations. We will talk about here in a minute, but net sheets are really important. And I talk about that a lot in all my classes, but these are things that I put together. If you are a newer agent or you haven't done a lot of listings and you're just really nervous about going on appointments, this is something great to have in front of you. Not only can you have the seller follow with you in this, but it's actually a cheat sheet for you to stay on track. Sometimes we forget, oh my gosh, we didn't say this, or I forgot to mention this, or whatever. This is a really good way to kind of breeze through this. I highlighted the main things that I feel are important that you need to be asking them about and giving them pointers about. So you don't have to read every little thing in there, but it's a good idea to go through and talk about, whenever we have your financial considerations, we have to know, if you have a mortgage balance, second, a home equity loan, second mortgage, any prepayment penalties that might be part of your contract when you bought the home. We talk about pre-sale preparations and closing costs. It's a good time to break it down and let them know what's included at that time. The taxes, we're not accountants, so we don't want to give too much advice, but basically, if you don't know the difference, with the capital gains, this is kind of something that can help you out. Again, you want to refer them to somebody because you just don't know exactly the situation. But it's basically a 2 and 5 rule. If they've been in the home for 2 years out of the last 5, and they don't have any, they haven't made money off of it that's above $250,000 for a single person or $500,000 for a married couple. There's so many things to think about as well that we probably don't want to be given a lot of advice about, but just so you know, if somebody is concerned, that's something you can tell them to look into with their accountant. Moving costs, same thing. There's going to be costs involved. This is a good way to go through and talk to them about the selling condition of their home, things that, let's start out, first of all, let's fix the things that need to be fixed. Next of all, let's clean the things that need to be cleaned. And last of all, let's open it up. Let's get people in here, moving some things out, put it in storage, whatever you got to do, box up some things just so it looks more open, so it shows better. Again, this is a good cheat sheet for you when you're going through this. And then of course, professionally staging homes or not. We have this wonderful thing now that instead of you having to hire a stager, which I'm not against that, but if that's what you want to do, great. But if you don't, and you don't want to, get into too much detail about who, who's going to come in, who's going to pay for that. A lot of these photographers now will go into a vacant home. They will get the photography done and they will place furniture in that home on those photos so that you can put those on the MLS to show what it would look like. And you can advertise with your marketing that way and stuff. So just something you can think about. This is the seller's net sheet, and I don't know, hopefully you guys can see this. I'm hoping it's going to open up for me. I'm not sure why it's cutting off the edges though. Goodness. So Darren is on here asking, he says he's never hired a stager. Does anybody know about how much they ask? So if you have any comments, if you guys want to reply to him, that would be awesome. So this is the net sheet that I use. Oh, I knew that was going to happen. Darn it. I want to see if you guys would just give me 2 seconds. I want to see if I can pull up a net sheet that is just an example that we can use. Let's try this. I'm assuming you guys can see that. Can somebody unmute and tell me, can you see that full net sheet now that I put it on that different screen?
I can see it, but it's very, very blurry.
Is that, I wonder what is the deal with that? Is that better or worse?
That's better.
Is that better? Good.
Yes.
All right. So
Blurry, but readable.
okay. So it looks like the more I zoom in, the better it looks. So, okay. So I'm going to hurry and delete something off of here though, because I don't want my information of my people on here. Okay. So for instance, this is a net sheet that I have used for a really long time. I know that you can get these from the title company and other places, which is great. If you have somebody you can get it from, that's great. Do whatever you've got to do. But this is something that I've always used, and I've had people say, I don't want to do that because they're going to hold me to it. That's not true. I have never had that because I explained to them that this is a, what's that? This is basically, this is just an approximate based on the information collected from the seller. I tell them that this is just to give them an idea where they're at. So I have this set up, and I have a lot of people that request this from me after classes, and you're welcome to if this is something that you want. So just for instance, I set this up on a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, and I put the price in, say it's $244.9. You can see that I've got the title insurance. It is timesing that times 0.5 or sometimes 0.65. It just kind of depends on the price of the home. You can actually get that amount from the title company if you're not sure. These numbers here that I'm showing you of the escrow closing agent fees, doc prep fees, reconveyance fees and everything, those are all, those are just numbers I put in there based off the numbers I could see that they were charging. So they're not exact, but it does come up pretty close to what they normally charge. So you can raise them up. I try to overestimate and hope that it, you know, it always comes in lower and then they end up with more money. Oh, whoops. Okay, so you can see on here that all the blue is their closing costs with title. Okay, so that's something to explain to them. You're going to pay this no matter what. The brokerage fee, I put this in there just to give you an idea if you wanted to change some things. So a brokerage fee, let's just say for instance on this one, you're basing it off of 5%. You're going to offer 5%. You can change that here to 6%. You can take out compliance fees, administration fees, whatever you want to call them. I just put them on there so you guys can see the difference. Basically what that will do is that will calculate for that seller based off the sales price that you have. It's going to give you what the fees will end up being. And then their mortgage balance, I put in there 161. I basically would do $100 or like $1,000, maybe $1,500 more, depending on what type of a loan they have. I usually estimate at least $1,000 more than what they're telling me their estimated payoff is, because there's interest that has accrued that they haven't added on there yet. And then of course the property taxes depend on, you know, if it's being paid for the year, if they pay that or they have it in an escrow. Either way, they're going to get charged for the time that they're in there. So when I do this, say I listed this month and I plan on that, you know, hopefully they are closed by July. You take their taxes, you divide that by the 12 months times how many months that they're going to be in the home. And you can see that that number is put in over here on a spreadsheet. I'm not a guru when it comes to Excel spreadsheets, but I did figure all this out and it works really good. You just got to make sure your numbers are right. So I just wanted to show you this because I think it's really helpful for your sellers and, you know, everyone to see that's sitting down going over these numbers. Oops, I don't know what they did here. That you have your total expenditures that will add up at the bottom, and then you have what their cash in hand will be. At the bottom here, you can see that it says these are estimated sellers, closing costs, and then if your escrow is received every month through your payment, that will be credited back to you from your mortgage company. So, you know, the taxes are always collected for the months that the seller's in it, and then they are credited to the buyer, and the buyer's responsible for the full year. That's how that works. And so that's why they would end up getting that back from their escrow if they have that. So any questions, comments on that? You guys are a quiet bunch. Yeah.
What's the FedEx wire fee that you have on there? I've never seen that, and should I be worried that I haven't?
Which fee?
FedEx wire fee, it's like $45. I can't see it on the screen because it's blurry, but you've sent me this sheet before. And so I just took it off. I've never seen it before, but I just thought this would be a good time to ask.
No, that's a great question. Okay, so whenever your seller, when they're going to pay off their loan, they're going to charge like a wire fee. A lot of times we call them wire fees now. But sometimes there's FedEx fees if they're sending documents out and they have to come back, or wire fees, any kind of extra fees that might be involved. That would be the fees that I'm talking about. So say for instance that, you know, when a buyer sends their money to the title company for their down or whatever, if they wire it, the bank charges them a fee to do that. And that's the fee that they collect, is whatever it's costing. And there's other miscellaneous fees too, recording fees and things like that. So I just,
on the one you said FedEx fee, and I was like, I have no idea what this is.
That's old fashioned, I know, but yeah, sometimes, like I said, if they've got to send a package out, you know, say the seller's somewhere else and they got to send it to them and they've got to get it notarized and signed and sent back because they're not here for the closing. Any fees that would be involved with sending and receiving that stuff, the seller, you know, is going to end up charging them for that.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah, and then like Marlene says, the title company you work with can also make a net sheet for you with their fees if you provide them the basic information, and they will. So you could use that if you wanted to take that and take the numbers off of that and put it on here, or whatever you want to do. My whole point of this, honestly, is to make sure if you're not using some kind of a net sheet to see where you're at and where the sellers are, even if they're not going to give you a mortgage balance, if you don't feel comfortable getting that or they don't want to give that to you, that's fine. Put it as 0 and then tell them to subtract it out of the seller's cash in hand when you give them this, because you don't want to get to closing and then find out that your seller doesn't have enough equity in their home to pay all the fees involved. And now all of a sudden you've got a buyer that's ready to close and a seller that doesn't have any extra cash to close the deal. So I honestly don't know how you do it without a net sheet, but I've never done that. But I use a budget too to budget my bills, and not everybody does. So it's all preference, but
Can I
it's
make a
just,
comment?
what's that?
When I was new, before I knew how to do the net sheets very well, and I had to have a company give me a really good net sheet, but it doesn't work anymore. So I'd love yours, and I'll put that in email. But one of the things that I did that was really helpful is I would call the title company and say, can you kind of do a preliminary numbers for me, and we'll write all over it's an estimate. And so we did that, and then that way it's pretty close. And if you're new and you don't know how to do it, that's kind of a good way to do it if you've got a relationship with the title company.
Yeah, that's true. One other thing I want to point out too is that on these net sheets, when I go on my appointments, when I do a net sheet, I will normally do, okay, best case scenario, worst case scenario, saying, okay, this is what the market analysis came in at, and it's, this amount. If we're going to bump the price up a little bit because the market has allowed for that, I will do that as the best case. And then I will do worst case that maybe comes down 5,000 lower than what the comps came in at, just in case somebody asks for closing costs or whatever. But I also, when I go on my listing appointment and we sit down and we fill out this net sheet and we do it, I always put a home warranty on there of $500, and I always put on estimated, I put typically requested closing costs for buyer to be included. And I'll do that about 2.5% and put it right on the net sheet. That way they're well aware that that's something that can come in. It prepares them for that. It's not something that we talk about after we've listed it and they already think they're going to make X amount of money on it. And then every time I get an offer in on the home, I will redo a net sheet based on every offer that comes through, exactly what that offer is offering. Does that make sense? I think that it's the best way to be upfront and let them make that decision, because we all know that when it comes right down to it, people want to know what their bottom dollar is. They don't really care about all the other things in between. That's our job to worry about that. But they want to know, what is my bottom line? What's it going to be? And if you're just honest from the get-go, you don't have those conversations about, I'm not paying a buyer's closing costs, because they don't understand that the buyer's really borrowing the money. So that's a good time to put that on there as well. Okay, so I need to give you another code word real quick before we move on. And that new code word, it's 2 words, and it's don't panic. Don't panic. Okay, so agent safety tips, open houses and things like that. We want to be aware of so many things, of course, for our own sake. We got to keep us safe. We all know that there's been horrible things that have happened to real estate agents, men and women. And you know what? We don't want to be a part of that. And we certainly don't want to know anybody that's had to go through something like that. Sorry, I'm looking to see. Yes, I gave 4 code words so far. Okay. Anyway, I think that we have to be very cautious. I just think that it makes a big difference. We have to really, watch out for a lot of different things, not just for ourselves. The property, we got to be aware of scams. You have to make sure you let the light in, and always bring up the rear. If people are going in front of you and they're walking through an open house that you have, you know what, try to get them to walk through with you, all of them at the same time. There are people that come and they scam, and they will come in, and if you're there by yourself, you'll have a couple of people, and one will go one way and one will go the other way. You have to be bold enough to say, listen, I am so sorry, but I can't have you walk through by yourself. I need everybody to be together. So even if you've got 2 different couples that walk in the door at the same time, do the same thing with them. I know it's hard when they've got little kids and those kids are running off and they're getting into things or whatever. Even then, don't be afraid if you're going to hurt somebody's feelings, because if you're there representing that seller, your job is to take care of their property. if you have little kids that are jumping on beds and getting into toys and things like that, you need to say, you know what, I'm sorry, but you need to stop him from getting into things like that. Right now, obviously, we wouldn't even let that happen because of the virus, but typically that would be the best way to handle it. I would always try to have somebody there with you. If you can even have a loan officer or somebody there with you that can help you out, that would be great. Another agent would be great. That way you're not ever put in a situation where people are walking through without you and something can come up missing or something. Carry less of your valuables with you. I'm going to say this, and I know there's probably not a lot of people that are fond of it, but you know what, if you have a concealed weapons permit and you're carrying, which I do, have it where you can access it. Have it, if you have pepper spray, have your pepper spray where you can access it. You just never know when you might run in that situation. If somebody's going to do something, they're certainly not going to wait for you to run over to your purse and grab your gun or your, whatever it is, your phone, whatever you need. Another thing is, have somebody on speed dial, have it ready. If you're walking through and you're uncomfortable and you're just feeling like, oh my gosh, this don't feel right, you call somebody and, let them listen to the conversation. Tell your office where you're going to be, if you're going to go show up home. There's all kinds of things that you can do to make sure that you're staying safe, and plan your strategy. You got to think about this stuff. When I first got in the business, I was so excited just to get people to go look at homes that I had a buyer call me. I had a home, I believe it was vacant. I can't remember. Nobody was there. The gentleman met me there. And as soon as we got there, of course, I'm, oh, hi, how are you? And I'm, introducing myself and everything, excited to go in. We walked to the upstairs and then went to go down the stairs. And as I started down the stairs, it was kind of dark. So I was trying to turn lights on. And all of a sudden I got this, just an eerie feeling like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This guy's behind me. I'm in front of him. I don't have my phone. I don't have anything. So it just didn't feel right. I just had that feeling, something telling me in my gut, telling me, you know what, this is not good. You need to go back upstairs. So as soon as I got to the bottom of the stairs, I flipped the light on and then I turned around and went back up, and he kind of looked at me funny, like, what are you doing? And I said, you know what, I'm sorry. I think my husband just pulled up. He was going to meet me here and bring me some lunch. And he was so thrown off by that. And I can't say for sure that there was something bad going to happen, but I had that feeling and I just knew. And ever since then, I just don't put myself in that situation ever. A lot of times I do have my husband go on appointments with me, especially if it's somebody I don't know, or, it's a male, or I don't know, whoever. Just stay safe, you guys.
Quick.
I just wanted to say really quickly that there's not a lot of people that know about the feature on the Supra app that is the alert feature. So if you're seeing a home that you have, like with buyers, where they have a Supra on it, once you unlock the house with your Supra, in your app, there's a little, down at the bottom of, like below the obtain key, there's an alert button, and in your Supra or settings online, you can set 3 emergency contacts that when you hit that button, it'll automatically let them know, hey, I'm at this house. I don't feel super comfortable. Here's the address. And you can set it to whoever you want. So personally, I have my broker, my dad, and my boyfriend as my 3 emergency contacts, and it'll immediately text them and send them a voicemail saying, hey, Brianne doesn't feel super comfortable. If you want to go check on her, like, this is serious.
That's a good idea. I seen that on there, and I'll be honest, I figured it was something like that, but I've never looked into it. But yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was, and when we did a safety class here a little bit ago, when everything was happening with the board, when they were saying that there was that one guy going around, and so for sales meeting safety, and Corey let everybody know about it, and it was pretty cool. I thought everybody should know that. Yeah, the new agent.
Another thing that I like to do is I like to check out the phone numbers of people I'm going to be meeting that I don't know on Forewarn. I really like that.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah.
To add one other thing, one of the things I've noticed when I'm out showing homes is that there's oftentimes agents will hang the Supra boxes really down low on rails or places like that cause you to have to get down on your hands and knees practically to undo those boxes. that is a really compromised situation for anybody, but especially for women. And so I would just ask, you know, male agents particularly, but everybody, to not hang them low, but to keep them up high enough that you can be aware of your surroundings and know what's going on while you're unlocking that box.
Yeah, that is true. I've been in situations like that too. Even, you know, putting them somewhere that's so far away or, you know, things like that. But yeah, I think that's a really good idea. You know, it's just stuff, like I said, it's stuff that you don't think about. And then one time you happen to be in a situation where you go, oh my gosh. I mean, obviously that's how most of us learn, is by, you know, trial and error. But we don't want to learn the hard way with that. It's just not worth it. And you know what? It's happening to men too. I mean, we've seen, you know, with the one agent that was killed by, you know, I think it was his tenants, but, you know, nonetheless, he was still put in a bad situation. So yeah, thank you, you guys. I appreciate your comments. So we've already talked about the virtual tours. I talked about that at the very beginning, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. But I don't know if you guys have these out for your showings or your listings. If you are even want to work with some for sale by owners and help them out, it's a good way to, you know, put together a flyer of some type that says help stop the spread, stay healthy, refrain from touching the countertops, the door handles, appliances, lighting, faucets, things like that. Also, no children under 18 should enter the home. You know, it's important for everybody. And I think that the more that we are proactive with this, hopefully we can get back to work and we can get back to normal. But until then, I think that we need to let people know that we do care and that we're going to give them the tools they need to stay safe too. So if you haven't done something like this for your clients, I would definitely do this for your buyers as well. You know, if you're going to go through homes, tell your sellers, you know, have them have all the lights on, the blinds open. If there's certain places that they think people are going to want to look in, closets or something, have them open them. Just have them leave them open so that people don't have to go in and touch things. And then, you know, if you can find sanitizer, definitely put sanitizer in the home.
I have a question, Cindy. Another thing you can do is when you're showing the property, just bring the wipes with you. Then the other agent doesn't have to run all the way over to that house to turn on all the lights and do all that. Because I've had to do that, and it'd be a lot easier if the agent showing it could bring the wipes and just, or a glove to turn on and off the lights.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And, you know, another thing too, that when we were talking about with the key boxes and things like that and staying safe, you know, if you can show up before your clients get there and get the lights turned on and do all that, like you're saying, open up the key, you know, get the key, the lockbox, everything opened up, then you don't find yourself in that situation where you're trying to do three things at once. And it's taking your concentration off of what you should be thinking about. I usually try to get there ahead of my clients and at least turn on the lights and, you know, do all those kind of things. But
Thanks, Cindy.
Yeah.
So with the agents in my office, I actually had them put a disclaimer on kind of like a little flyer that they were putting on the houses, just because of liability. I don't want to see maybe one of the sellers say, hey, you're responsible, I got this virus, this and that. What do you think about like the liability aspect of this?
You know what, that's a good question. I honestly, I've had my agents even ask me the same question, and I'll tell you, I firmly believe in just making sure that you disclose, and not only disclose to people the risks and everything, let them make that decision. But I do it in writing. I mean, even if it's got to be an email that you send that says, you know, I just wanted to give you an update. This is the things that we're doing to try to keep people safe. Are you still wanting to have showings in your home? Are you still wanting buyers to come in? If so, these are the precautions we need to take. You know, this is the risk involved. And then either let them write back and say, you know, yeah, I'm fine with that as long as we do those things, whatever. Or if they say, you know, no, you don't do it anymore. But even if you've got to get it in writing of some kind of a letter you type up for your own office, that when you're listing these homes that you know, I did my Zoom with my sellers. They were very adamant about not letting people come in because of their situation with personal situation, where she works, things like that. And they were trying to keep everybody safe, not just them, but people coming through. I did that Zoom meeting, it's saved. They knew I was recording it. And we also did the same thing. I did a disclosure with them and I had them sign it and send it back to me, basically saying that they were aware, you know, that that's what they wanted to do. So I would have done the same thing had they wanted to continue and have showings. I would have done the same thing. I think that right now we got to be very careful not to give advice of, well, it should be okay because we're going to wipe down or the other agent's going to wipe down. I think that the sellers need to make up their minds and the buyers, they need to decide what's important. And if they want it done, I think that you need to get something signed from them that says that that they're aware of the risk involved. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
So I just have been very adamant about making sure the sellers know that it's their decision to let people in their home. We can't control, you know, every buyer that comes through. And so, yeah.
I mean, you might even have to do on a listing agreement, do an addendum of some kind that states that information on there as well, that says, you know, we're advising you, you know, during this time, you know. The NAR has a lot of really good information too. If you go to their site, they've got a lot of stuff that they've done up for this kind of thing too, that you can use. So, okay, so we already talked about the key boxes as far as how important I think it is to make sure that they're secure key boxes. This is the mechanical one I'm talking about. I think that it's important. People get that code and they can go in anytime they want to. So it's not like they're just going to go one time. They can go back as many times as they want. But the biggest thing is I think that we have to be careful when we're talking to our sellers about the things that could be at risk for them. And for sell by owners, the same thing. I use this to educate for sell by owners the same way I do my sellers when I'm listing. I think that they have to be, you know, really aware of what's in their surroundings, what buyers might see when they walk through, you know, valuables, weapons, prescription medications, you know, computers, credit cards, ID cards, you know, just all kinds of things that they need to be aware of. Oh, it wasn't supposed to skip to that one. The prescription medications is a big deal. A lot of times, you know, people will say when you get to an open, like you're walking through a house or something with your buyer and they're like, well, I got to go to the restroom. I mean, you know, how do we know that they don't have prescription medication in that bathroom that they could be taken? So I think that your sellers have to be aware. Again, that's something that you have to let them know ahead of time. And so, you know, at least you've given them that direction to say, you know, please put those kind of things away. Children and, you know, locking up things just is such a big deal. So moving on to the next deal, as far as talking about seller disclosures, this is on here just to kind of give you ideas. This is not a class on disclosures. This is not a class on, you know, HOAs and all that. It's just more of a way to make sure that you're providing direction to your sellers, that you're aware of the things that need to be done. The seller's disclosures, just so you all know, you should know this, but, you know, the seller's property disclosure is only one thing. That's just one part of the seller disclosures. There's the lead-based paint, there's the commitment for title insurance, CC&Rs for the property with the most, you know, recent minutes for HOAs and budgets and things like that. Copy of any long-term tenant leases that may not be expiring, you know, prior to the closing. Even copy of any short-term rentals that they have. Management agreements, any water rights, notices of claims that, you know, environmental problems, sell or other disposition of a U.S. real property by a foreign investment. We'll talk about that here in a minute if you're not familiar with what that is, and we'll kind of discuss that, but hopefully you guys can see that okay. I guess I got to redo some of these. They're more blurry than what I thought they were. Most of all, the one thing with the seller property condition disclosure that you need to be aware of is that the seller needs to fill this out. And if they're not capable or they can't do this, then you need to have a family member or somebody help them fill this out. Don't fill it out for them. That puts you at so much risk, and it's just a liability you don't want to take on. The one thing about this is a lot of people think that just because someone didn't live in the property or they rented it out, that they don't have to provide this, but that is not true. It even states in here that even if they didn't occupy the property, they can disclose that on here. They don't, and they only have to disclose what they know. So if there's things they don't know about, they can put NA or no or yes or whatever they want to put for an explanation, but they need to put something. So make sure that they're filling it out completely before you get it, take it from them and then you put it on the MLS or you send it over to a buyer's agent and it's half complete. It's your job as a selling agent to make sure they filled it out completely. And you do want to explain to them how important it is that they're honest, that they put things on there, that even if it doesn't seem like a major thing, they still need to disclose it, because somebody will always tell. If they know, they're going to tell, and you don't want them to come back later and have neighbors telling the new buyer what happened, and all of a sudden now they want to sue everybody and things like that. So, just tell them that, it's more important. It's actually for their sake that they fill this out to the best of their knowledge. And it is in depth. So, like I said, I'm not going to go through every page of it. I just want you to be aware how important it is. And I want you to be aware that once you have your seller fill this out at the listing time, some people leave them there, come back and get them 2 weeks later, whatever. However you want to do it, that's fine. But I will tell you that if it's not done and you get an offer on a home, you only have a certain amount of time to get that over to the buyer. So it really is better to get it done. The quicker, the better. And then of course, if it's been, a month and you had them fill it out and they, filled it out completely, a month later, you get an offer from a buyer. You want to ask them, do you have anything you need to update on this disclosure? Has anything happened that I didn't know about? Sometimes they've had, a water problem, or they've had something break or whatever. That's a good time to update that form. And so, I think it's really important to make sure, even at that point, that when you do this, it says disclosure form update, they can sign on there and they can say whether there are changes or there's not. So a lot of people don't follow that very well. And there is an addendum as well that they can list the items on there. Another thing is the request for homeowners and the association documentation. That's a form that we have on our MLS. I filled this out prior to, like, when I'm getting the listing ready, I send all this over so I can get the information prior to a buyer even making the offer, so that we have it available to them right away. We don't want any delays.
Cindy?
Yes.
Just a quick question for you. Back on the disclosures, recently I had a gentleman that was in a senior care facility. We were selling his home that he hadn't lived in for a couple of years. He had somebody renting it. He was getting older. He was forgetting a lot of things and going through he had no other family. I mean, going through the disclosures was quite an adventure with him. And there were a lot of things that he was just like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And so I'm just wondering, I just verbalized that to the other agent and said, look, we're giving you the best answers we can here, but you need to make sure that you guys, do your due diligence and check on these things. But this is the best we're coming up with. I'm just curious, is there anything else you can do in that situation besides just telling the other agent? Because I was trying to make sure I covered him and didn't get him any legal trouble, and then just tried to cover my own back by going to the other agent and saying, we're giving you the best answers. So I don't know if I did that right or wrong, but I'm just curious if anybody's been in that situation. What do you do?
You know what? I still think that whether it's this form or any other form, I think that the best that you can explain things to people so they understand it in their terms. We sometimes tend to want to make everything complicated and we want to be wordy. And I think that even in situations like this, if you were to do this and then even do an addendum or on each area that he was unaware of or whatever, you could go through the whole thing even and just say, nothing that I'm aware of, nothing that I'm aware of, you know what I mean? Unaware, unaware, unaware. Whatever the explanation happens to be, at least you're being honest. And then in this situation where you're talking about, I think that even if you were to put right on the form itself or do an addendum to this form that says, buyer needs to verify all information. Seller has not lived in the home for X amount of years. He is not sure, I think that as long as we're disclosing that to people and saying this is the situation like you did, and then having them sign that, saying that you did tell them that, then you're okay. The problem is you get people that when they say, well, I don't know, I haven't lived in the home, I'm not even filling this out, and they start lining through every page and not doing anything, and then maybe initial in it, and then just saying doesn't apply or not applicable or whatever. You know, I guess if the buyer's willing to sign that and accepts it that way, then that's okay, because you have provided that to them. But to not provide anything at all is the time that you're going to end up in trouble. So I think you're fine.
Cindy, this is Suzanne. I've understood that this form is just to help a seller. It's not a required form, that they could actually write out a disclosure. Is that correct?
Okay, so I'm going to read to you, because you guys probably can't see it on your, but I'm going to read to you the second section here that I highlighted, because you're right, a lot of people say that, but I want to read to you what this says, and then you can make that decision of how it works for you. Instruction to seller says, seller is obligated under law, regardless of occupancy, to disclose to the buyer defects in the property and facts known to seller that materially or adversely affect the use and value of the property that cannot be discovered by a reasonable inspection by an ordinary prudent buyer. This disclosure form is designed to assist seller in complying with these disclosure requirements. Please thoroughly disclose your actual knowledge regarding the condition of the property. The company, other real estate agents, and buyers will rely on this disclosure form. So it's telling you right there that under law, it's required. So when people say it's not required, as real estate agents and realtors, we're required to give this to the seller and ask the seller to fill this out. We can't always think that they're going to fill it out, honestly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And this form is legally required, or is this a recommendation?
It says the seller is obligated under law.
Right, to give the disclosure. I've heard it different ways, so I'm trying to clarify in my own head.
So basically what it is they're saying, we're going to give you this form, and as a seller, you're required, you're obligated under law to provide the buyer the information. And this is kind of a checklist of everything that we need you to look through to tell us if you have any problems or you've had problems.
Okay.
So if it doesn't apply to them, that's okay, because even people say that about new construction. There are disclosures for new construction that can be based on the land, you know, and stuff like that. So a lot of times people are like, yeah, well, it won't have it. Well, yeah, it may, because there may be other things on there concerning the environmental aspect of the property and things like that. So yeah, just, you always want to offer it out and give it to your sellers. If they're not willing to fill it out, then I would definitely get something that says that they, you know, they aren't going to do it. Basically, they're saying they're not going to do it. And I would have that on this page. I would have this on all of these pages, even if they draw a line through every page. Then it's up to the seller. The seller, it's them that's supposed to disclose, not you. But this is the way to protect you, to say, listen, I did tell the seller that this is what they were obligated to. That way you don't get a buyer's agent coming back on you saying, well, you knew about this, or you knew they didn't this or that. You know, it really is up to the seller to disclose. So, you know, it's like anything, it can be argued all day long of, you know, is it really required? Isn't it really required? Part of our listing agreement, when we list a property with a seller, states on that listing agreement that they will fill out the seller property condition disclosure. That is part of the listing agreement. So it can't be excluded off of the listing agreement. You know what I mean? You can't just exclude that if it's signed and said you're going to fill it out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
But they could add to it with whatever they want. I mean, they could add another page.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. And there are extra pages if they want to do that. There is an addendum to the seller property condition disclosure that they can fill out if they need more items. So it's not just based on this. If there's other things they know about, for instance, UDOT's coming through in a year and has already given the letter to tell them that they're going to come through and wipe out their property, they need to disclose that. You know, that's when you end up in trouble, especially if they're telling you and you know about it and you look through this disclosure and it's not on there. You need to, as an agent, say, listen, you need to disclose that because you've already told me about it, which means you know about it. We both, you know, could end up in trouble if we're not disclosing that and the buyer comes back. So it's a tough situation to be in sometimes, but you know, that's what they pay us the big money for, right? Okay, so why might a buyer?
Cindy?
Uh-huh.
Oh, Cindy, I just wanted just to add to that, that at the top of this document, it does say this is a legally binding document. And a couple years ago here in St. George, there was a seller and a listing agent who were both sued by a buyer because they did not disclose that there was mold in a home. And they knew it. It was disclosed during a home inspection, and they did not go back and update the seller's property condition disclosures. And when the buyer closed on the house and found out about it from one of the neighbors, the first thing they did was sue the listing agent and sue the seller. So,
yeah. Unfortunately, people are always going to point the finger at somebody else. So even your lovely sellers that you have a great relationship with, as soon as things go south, they're going to blame you. And so that's why it's really hard. You're in a, you know, it's hard to be in that situation where you're like, okay, well, I'm trying to represent them and I want to make sure that they're getting, you know, what they're supposed to get. And they're providing everything they're supposed to. You have to really look at yourself too and make sure that you're being covered. So if something's ever questionable or you're wondering, ooh, could that come back on me? Get it in writing. Just fill out something. I don't care if it's an email that you can use, because you can use that in court. Don't use a text because that doesn't work, but anything in writing that you can possibly get is definitely better than nothing. So yes, Carrie, you're right. That's why we should always tell them to disclose everything. People think that if they disclose something, they're going to lose, they might lose buyers. Well, you know, they can lose a lot more than buyers if they don't disclose and they know about something. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and let's see. I'm going to give you guys another code word real quick. The next one is showings. Showings. Okay, so I'm going to kind of cruise through some of this really quickly because there's things that are really important that I want to get to too. And I want to make sure that we're not going over our time limit. So why might a buyer order a home inspection? This is a really good, this goes along with that seller disclosure. And the reason I put this in here again is if you want to use this in a presentation, this is a good way to break down some of the things. And of course, there's more than this, but these are items that when you're going through this with a seller before you even list their home, that you can say, look, this is a few of the things, not everything, that they're going to look at. Is there anything on here you see that might be an issue that we need to disclose or we need to get fixed prior to even listing the home? Because there's so many things we don't think about, you know, rate on gas is one that we, you know, people are asking for those kind of things more and more all the time for inspections. Asbestos, lead-based paint, all of those things. And it's not that they can't be fixed. So if, you know, don't panic if something like that comes up. There are ways to remedy these kind of things. So I normally play this video. Those of you that are older like me probably remember this, but it's from the Money Pit. What we don't want to do is have those surprisings, you know, the surprises after closings. It's just no laughing matter. So would you guys like to watch it, or do you want me to continue and move on?
Continue.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny. I mean, you know, it's not realistic. Well, maybe. The tub falls through when they're filling up with water, and it's funny. He laughs, you know. So does everybody remember what this means when you went to through your real estate classes? Buyer beware, right? We have to be very careful with our buyers. If you are not getting a home inspection notice to your buyers and advising them that they should try to get a home inspection done on the home if possible, you know, it's a recommendation. Whether they do or they don't, if you don't, whether you have a form from your office that's similar or you want to get this off the MLS, wherever you want to do, make sure you're offering the home inspection to your buyers. And if they choose not to get it, that's fine. But at the bottom here, you can see that they have to either, they can check that they choose to get one or that they choose not to get one and then have them sign it. That again protects you. They can't come back later and say, I didn't know that we had that option to get a home. Uh-huh.
I had a situation where I had someone say that I did not tell them to get a home inspection and I did not help them, and then I picked who their inspection was, And I had email proof because I sent an email to everybody that, because I was a lender for many years before I was a realtor. I was a lender for 25 years before I was a realtor. So I have an email that I prepare, and I keep that in my digital file to protect myself.
Yeah, you have to. Again, it's, you know, it sounds horrible because it sounds like we're just trying to protect us, but it's not just us. We have to protect everyone involved in the transaction. And, you know, this protects the seller even if so they don't come back on the seller and say, well, we didn't know, we didn't think that you were going to let us do one of those, you know, things like that. So more documentation is better than none. So yes, you're right. So due diligence items, again, Rep C section 8.1, make sure that they're aware of all of the items that need to be checked. We give them a due diligence checklist that we have them sign, but do we really explain to them what's on there and why it's so important, and that there are even more things probably than what's listed there? The problem that we run into, I think, a lot of times is we get in that mode of, we go out, we show a few homes, and then bam, all of a sudden we've got to do a buyer broker agreement, we got to do the due diligence, we got to do all these things, and we do it all at the same time as when we're writing up the offer. Well, that right there in itself, writing up the offer and getting that negotiated, is just such a nightmare for a buyer anyway. There's so much information that they're just counting on you to do your job. They're not going to listen to you talk about due diligence and buyer brokers and all that representation at that time. It's just too much. So if you can I put together a buyer packet that as soon as I start working with a buyer, I give it to them, and it has all of those documents in there. All of them have draft wrote across them so that, you know, it's nothing that they're going to fill out, obviously, but, you know, I ask them to read through it. I go through it with them so that they understand, you know, what's coming up, where it starts. This is where we start looking at homes, we write an offer, this is what happens. And it takes them through the whole process. Yeah, it's a lot of information, but it's something that you're giving them that's valuable, that again, you can say, you know, here you go, here's a packet I gave to you. It includes all these things, you know, they're aware of it. Again, it's just so much better to talk about it before than it is to try to get it all in, you know, at the last minute. Convicted sex offenders and fees for services and dues for HOAs and things like that. They don't understand, especially if it's a new buyer that's never bought before. They don't understand. They don't even know that they have to check to get their homeowner's insurance quotes and things like that. So make sure you're giving them, you know, good direction with that. Okay, so again, common property sale disclosures. We all know how all this works. You know, as far as if it was built before 78, they've got to have their lead-based paint disclosures and things like that. How many of you, when you list a home that is 78 and older, whether you're listing it or you're working with a buyer, how many of you have went on the MLS and they have the lead-based paint disclosure on there filled out, but they also have the pamphlet for lead-based paint? Do you guys see that very often?
We usually try and put it in the document section so that somebody can pull it up if it's that old.
As far as the pamphlet and the both?
Yep. You got it right there. It's right on the FHA website if nobody knows where to find it.
Yep, it is.
FHA.org.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can find it. You can buy pamphlets, but if you're going to be on the listing side, just so you're aware, a lot of people don't know this. When they changed the lead-based paint disclosure, it used to be different. It looked different. And so now it's a little bit easier to read and go through. But I will tell you that if you're not aware, you will be today. So on the lead-based paint disclosure, of course, you've got the area that has where you're going to check whether the seller has information pertaining to lead-based paint or they don't. You're going to check those boxes. And then, of course, if they have it, they're going to check that they're going to provide it or that they don't have any or whatever. And again, I don't know why in the world this is not, it just isn't looking right on here, darn it. What I want to point out is that on here, you can see, hopefully on here, the buyer has to receive from the seller in the lead-based paint disclosure. It says that the seller is providing the lead-based paint disclosure and the lead-based paint pamphlet. That is part of your seller disclosures. That should be loaded when you load your seller disclosure, or I'm sorry, the lead-based paint disclosure, load a pamphlet in the MLS with it. Then the buyer's agent, it's there. If the buyer's agent, you know, pulls it up and asks for it or whatever, I always send it now, whether they ask for it or not, because it's part of your seller disclosure. The seller's supposed to provide that to the buyer. So how do we know that the buyer's agent is pulling it up and giving it to them? We don't. So again, an email is the best way to send it, and send it to the buyer's agent and say, here's a copy of our seller disclosure along with the brochure. Please provide this to your buyer. And then that way you have proof that you actually sent it. So yes, it is in there and it is required. A lot of people didn't know that that's even in there. Again, we're not experts on this, but radon, you know, we know it causes lung cancer. It can be fixed. Mold can be fixed if it's done correctly. So, you know, don't have your clients running away if it's a little bit. I mean, if it's obviously the whole house, that could be a whole different story. But I put these on there just so that you guys are aware of the remediation costs that are involved and what it could be, so that if you're working with sellers, you can kind of give them some pamphlets and things that talk about what that would be. Asbestos, of course, same thing. Not everything has asbestos in it. So do all popcorn ceilings contain asbestos? Does anybody know? Anybody want to reach out there and answer that?
I'm going to say no.
Yeah, you're right. Not all of them do. So it's a texture of paint that was banned in 1977. The fibers could cause the lung disease and things like that, and when it was inhaled. And in Utah, individuals can remove areas with possible asbestos only if the area is saturated with waterproof, with water prior to removal, with safety gear. That's false. They have to submit for demolition and be submitted to the Utah Division of Air Quality, even if no asbestos is found. Again, we don't have to be, we don't have to be the experts on this, but I want you to be aware that there is information out there. If your buyers are asking about it or sellers are asking about it, definitely send them to the right links. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I'm not going to go over my time limit here. Okay, so once an offer is accepted, of course, earnest money is a big deal. This is just a breakdown. I'm not going to go through all of this. I just, again, have this on here so that you can go through it if you wanted to talk with your buyer, seller, whoever, about who's responsible for earnest money, how that's accounted for. If you're going to run it through the title company, make sure that you're getting the title company addendum that both buyer and seller have to sign. Confirmation of earnest money receipt, the same thing. Whoever's collecting that earnest money, you need to make sure that you're getting a signature for that. And then you can see that I've got that on there as far as the title insurance goes, or the title company, if they're going to collect it. Title policy. If you haven't been through a title class to know the differences and what to look for, I highly suggest you do that. I think that it's really a good idea. If you even just meet with one of your escrow officers, they can go through those kind of things with you. Again, these are steps that we're going to go through and talk to the sellers about. Buyer ordering an appraisal. The buyer removes conditions or sell. Step number 4. The buyer's response to due diligence is very important. You need to make sure that you know that whatever date is on there, you need to have it resolved by that date. So if you are working with your buyer and you decide that you're going to send over some items that the buyer's going to ask the seller for, and it is 10 o'clock in the morning on the day that it's supposed to be the deadline, you only have till 5 p.m. to have that resolved. So try to not wait till the last minute to get those things done. If you're going to have your buyer is going to get an inspection done, and you've got an offer going on, try to get that done right away. Try not to push it out 2 weeks if you don't have to. And of course, then we can have people that are going to go through, they're going to schedule their walk through to verify the condition of the property towards the end of there. And just so you know, that can be done no earlier than 7 days prior to settlement. Sorry, I don't mean to try to sound like I'm rushing through these. Not that it's not important, but like I said, I'm trying not to do a forms class. I'm just trying to kind of point out the things that are really important. I do need to give you guys another code. And that next code is the secret. The secret. Just so you know, my granddaughter put these words together for me. She's 10. So when people go through and you decide to do your walkthrough inspection, just so you know, please tell your buyers that's to determine that the property is as it was represented, to make sure that repairs have been done if there was something agreed to. It's not for them to go in and start looking for more things that need to be fixed that they didn't notice before and things like that. You know, make sure that, you know, the lawn's still being, you know, done and it's not completely dead by the time they close, just things like that that you need to address. If your buyer fails to conduct that walkthrough inspection on time, then they're basically waiving that right. And well, it says it constitutes, you know, shall not constitute a waiver of the buyer. But I don't know how you honestly would get somebody to come back and fix something once they moved in. That's not going to happen. So make sure you're doing that walkthrough. There is a form that we have in our office that is for the walkthrough as well. And that is another one kind of like the inspection that says, you know, we need to do a walkthrough inspection, you know, and if they waive that inspection right, then at least you have a signature saying that they did. What happens at the closing meeting, you know, you want to talk to them about that. You want to talk to all the things that need to be done. If you haven't put together a list of utilities and things like that that need to be done that you're sending to your seller or your buyer so that they know who to contact to get things done, make sure that you're covering those things with them. Again, a lot of times homeowners don't know that that's what they're supposed to do. Sorry, I'm just looking back. I've got, so Ryan said, is there any requirement? Oh, sorry. I don't know if I was supposed to say your name because it says private. I apologize. To disclose if the house has had meth or been remediated. Okay, so that has been an ongoing argument. So sometimes houses are put on the market and a buyer goes through, they get an inspection done, they find out it has meth, and then they back out, and then the agent puts the house back on the market, but they don't disclose it. Yes, it needs to be disclosed. If they know it has it, disclose it. It needs to be disclosed because it has to be the, and I'm not going to go to a great big spill about this because it's something they need to check into. Like I said, I'm not a professional when it comes to this. As far as testing and stuff like that goes, but you know, if it's a certain level, then it's unsafe, and the health department needs to be involved, and there's a lot of steps they need to go through to make sure that that gets taken care of. So if your client mentions that to you and they know something, you make sure that they're disclosing it. If they're not willing to disclose it, I wouldn't even talk about listing that home. But that's my opinion. Your broker may say something different, but you know, in my 21 years, I've only dealt with that twice, and both times, one was a buyer. They were buying it. We knew that it had meth in it, and they had gotten all the paperwork, all the documentation showing that they had got it cleaned out. It had been retested. My buyers were fine with that, and I did have them sign something saying that they knew that that was, that the meth had been an issue before that. You know, if it's below a certain level, I would make that decision myself. If it's there, it's there, and you need to let the buyer decide if that's something that it would be acceptable for them or not. We can't decide what's good enough and what isn't. It's just like the virus that's going around right now. We can't decide if we think it's safe or it's not to have people go in. We just have to let our buyers and sellers make that decision. So I would always place it back in their hands. Okay, so the importance of earnest money. I really want to talk about this. This will probably be mostly what we talk about for the next little while, because earnest money has become something that there's a lot of liability with. A lot of brokers have decided not to keep trust accounts within their office and hold the earnest money. I'm not going to say right or wrong. It just, I guess it's preference, and it's deciding how much liability and how much work they want to do. Having a trust account is a lot of work. It really is. I When I had my office open, you know, you have a lot to account for. The one thing I did like about it is I had control over that because the contract states that I can release it if the buyer is within certain dates, has given notice, or if the buyer went out of certain dates, then you know, I can release it to the seller or whatever. Now that it's going through the title company a lot, that is not the case. So you need to be aware of that, and you need to let your buyers and sellers know that if your office does not hold that earnest money and the title company holds it, they are just a third party and they are not a part of the contract and agreement that they have signed between buyer and seller. You will not let them release that money without both signatures in every case, just so you're aware. So with that being said, oh, go ahead.
Down here in southern Utah, there are some title companies that will, anyway, there are some title companies in southern Utah that don't require it and some that do. So it's kind of a good idea to build a relationship with the title companies. Then you know who does and who doesn't, and because they all have their own different policies because they're third parties. So at least that's what we found.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Different up there.
Yeah, it's really hard to hold them to something when you don't have a contract with them. So, and yeah, some of them might not want to even accept it. I'm not sure. I haven't worked with any around here that don't, but I'm sure that is the case. Okay, so I want to talk to you first of all. Can you guys see that screen that is up there? I know it looks a little blurry, but can you kind of read it? So I want to go through this scenario with you. If you want to take some notes, you can. I'm not gonna give you a quiz about this or anything. But so I just want to kind of show you something as it plays out, so that you have a better idea of how earnest money can be misconstrued as being something it's not. So on December 9th, buyer Bob makes an offer with his agent on 1234 First Street. On the 10th, they accept the offer. On the 12th, buyer Bob gives $500 to the title company. So we've got three things happening. We've got the offer, we got it accepted. Now the title has taken the money of the $500. The finance deadline is January 8th. So the closing deadline is January 18th. So on the 18th of January, the buyer doesn't show up to close, and the agent decides to put the home back on the market. So on the 23rd, so as you can see, if he didn't show up, closing date was supposed to be on the 18th. He didn't show up. Nothing happened. Evidently, he defaulted on this. And so typically the earnest money of the $500 at that point, because he passed his financing deadline and everything on the 8th, and then he didn't show up to closing, typically that $500 earnest money should be released to the seller. But the title company's holding it, so keep that in mind. Buyer Bob turns around on February 1st, and he makes an offer on 5678 2nd Street. On the 3rd of February, they accept the offer. Okay, so on the 7th of February, the agent sends a copy of the earnest money deposit previously received from the title company, dated for December 12th. Okay, December 12th was when buyer Bob had originally given the earnest money to title for the first offer. Is everyone following me so far? Sorry, I was checking to see if anybody was chatting. Okay, so on the 9th, February 9th, 2 days later, after the agent had sent the earnest money deposit copy over, the title company sends an internal request to transfer the earnest money from buyer Bob's first home that he defaulted on to the new file. As you can see, if you're kind of following this, I want to know what your thoughts are here in a minute. So, you know, kind of keep in mind where that money's at and who really has it. So who thinks that earnest money was transferable over to that new property? Anybody? And if so, why? Anybody think it wasn't supposed to be?
Sketchy.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so the timeline, basically this is a timeline for Buyer Bob, okay? This is Buyer Bob on the second offer. So on the 23rd of February, that's their financing and appraisal deadline. On the 28th, they decide to do a flexible deadline. It's added to the contract. If you haven't used a flexible deadline addendum, I highly suggest that you read one and know what it is before you ever sign one for either of your clients on either side. Because the deadline on a flexible deadline, whoever sets it up, basically you set it up to say, okay, for instance, we're going to close between the 28th of February and March 14th. That's a flexible deadline. If the seller decides, or whoever decides they're going to close sooner, they have to give a written notice to the other person, and then they have, you know, within so many days, 4 days, 5 days, I can't remember what it is, but anyway, there's quite a process that has to take place to give notice to say, hey, we're closing early. Okay, so on the 25th, the closing is confirmed and the buyer schedules for February 28th to close. All parties are notified on the 27th that the lender moved the closing to March 1st, so it's been rescheduled. So we're still within our flexible deadline situation. However, buyer, you know, 28th didn't happen, the 1st didn't happen, and then on the 28th, when the buyer agent, so the buyer agent on this situation, it's kind of confusing, notifies the listing agent of an approval problem. So now the lender confirmed with the listing agent that the buyer had misrepresented on his loan application about child support. So now his debt to income ratio is too high and he would need a co-borrower. So the finance and appraisal deadline was the 23rd. Now we're on the 28th. Now the buyer doesn't qualify without getting a co-borrower. So on the 1st, the listing agent emails the lender and the buyer for an update, and there's no response. So this has been a few days after, you know, it's the next day, notified the buyer's agent that the seller had decided they're putting the home back on the market because evidently the buyer doesn't qualify. They're past their financing and appraisal deadline. So again, on the 2nd, the buyer agent is emailed. The agent confirms that she received the same information from the buyer and the lender, and they both understood the need for the seller to put the home back on the market. So let me give you the other side of the seller situation. Seller situation is they have a home that they are that they're purchasing that's under contract. They only have until, I believe, the 5th of March or 4th of March or something like that to have the home under contract. If it doesn't go under contract, then they can put it back as a time clause and kind of bump them out and take another offer. So trying to keep the home under contract, trying to stay within the dates for the other side, they go ahead, they put the home back on the market, and then on the 3rd of March, the seller receives a new accepted offer. Okay, so it's an accepted offer, they're moving forward, still haven't heard anything from the other side, you're just assuming everything's a done deal. So the lender sends an email to the listing agent on the 8th, so March 8th. So we've got several days have gone by now. 8 days have gone by, nothing's happened. And the lender starts asking for the social security number of the sellers on this deal. Now this is the buyer Bob's lender that's requesting these things. So when they're notified that basically they're no longer under contract, you know, it goes on and on and on. The reason I'm bringing this up is because this happened to me. And sometimes the best way to show people what not to do is to say, listen, you know, as embarrassing as it might be, things might be done wrong. You learn, you know, baptism by fire, whatever it happens to be. That's usually the best way you learn. So all of this is just email correspondence that went back and forth between the agents. The main thing about this that I want to bring up is that with this flexible settlement deadline, The problem that we ran into is that when the buyer decided that they were going to close and they set the closing date to begin with, they should have sent a letter or some kind of notice over to the seller and let them know that they would be closing a certain date. That way everybody's notified, and that is now the new closing date. Same thing on the other side. Had we sent a letter that said, buyer, we are planning to close on this date, this is when we're going to close, they would have been notified in writing and everything would have been okay. However, I did not know that. And so I assumed, because everything had gone, crazy, and all of a sudden now the buyer wasn't qualified, the lender in all these emails back and forth had basically said how frustrated they were that they had lied and that they had had this other home under contract before that, all of these things. And so basically what I want to point out is that earnest money in this situation, when I got checking into it, that's how I found out that the earnest money had never been actually transferred, because it couldn't be transferred. So at that point, it's kind of like you're doing all this research to figure out how to keep your clients safe. My seller had decided that he was not going to sell the home. He didn't care if he lost the other one. He was not selling it to that buyer. That buyer didn't deserve it. They were lying or whatever. We ended up getting a notice from an attorney that the buyer had write a letter and say that they were still going to buy the home. They still had until the 14th to do that. And so in all fairness, I had contacted the other agent ahead of time and just said, this is the situation. I just want you to know this is what's happened. I'm sorry that your buyers, I didn't mean to put them in the situation. And they were really cool about it. It was an agent I knew really well. They were frustrated because they felt like the other party was wrong. The title company, I had contacted them. They were in the wrong, but they didn't care because they didn't have any contract with us. It didn't matter to them. Nobody had ever signed to get the earnest money released to the seller. So anyway, it just ends up being just an ugly thing. And then to do, of course, it happened to be my brother-in-law that I listed his house. And I had already reduced my commission down to almost nothing anyway to help them because they were going to buy another home. So, all in all, just long story short, of course, I ended up giving the other buyers, second buyers that had wrote the offer, we let them know what was going on. I ended up giving them equal to their earnest money, which was $1,000. We gave that back. I gave them another $1,000, and then I also gave them another $600 to pay for their home inspection for that home, plus to go towards a new one. So my point is that you got to be really careful. You don't want to end up in a lawsuit, and these things happen so quickly. You just never know. I mean, things that you wouldn't think are a big deal or you maybe overlooked, you don't want to find out the hard way. I was able to get out of that situation, and my brother-in-law did end up buying the home that they wanted and that they loved. That gentleman, buyer Bob, ended up buying that home. We ended up selling it to him because they ended up being able to close somehow. But it was really a nightmare for everybody involved. So be really careful with earnest money. If you have the buyer in that same situation and a deal fell through and that belongs to the seller, you need to explain that to your buyer, and definitely don't pass it along like it's still there and going to give it to the next home that they make an offer on.
Hey, Cindy, on that addendum with that range of dates for a closing, when and why would you use something like that?
Well, the reason we did that was because they weren't quite sure how long it was going to take to get everything done. And so they had set the closing to be the end of the month. And then she had asked me if we could maybe get an extension on it if we needed it. So at the time, she sent over the flexible settlement deadline. So we said, okay, yeah, we'll agree. As long as they close by this date, that's okay. And so we had agreed to that because the original date was the end of the month, but they were passing that. They're almost ready to pass that date. So other than sticking us to a certain date that the lender wouldn't be able to be ready for, we gave them that extra time. And I didn't understand how it worked, to be honest with you. She sent it over and I just, we looked at it. We thought, well, we're okay with that as long as it closes by the 14th. The problem is by the 30th, we were already being told they weren't even going to be able to close on the deal.
Right.
But the hard thing about it was it didn't matter. We still had till the 14th that we were bound to them unless we would have given them something in writing saying we're closing by this date. So it can be used, but you have to be just really careful about how, how you word it and how you, when you respond to send out notices and stuff like that. So
Make a comment.
sure.
It sounds like what really helped you in this situation was building strong relationships with the other agents that you work with and having a good rapport. Even when a situation gets ugly, if you've built good, strong relationships, as long as there's good communication and people are willing to see it from all sides and work together, then things can get worked through. And so I would say congratulations to you for building those strong relationships.
Thanks. And you know what? You're right. If I wouldn't have had that, so the agent, it's weird because her last name was Peterson too, but she was related to the buyer that was buying the home, buyer Bob, and I was related to the seller, and so it was kind of sticky anyway. You had to be careful, but you're right. I didn't know that agent. And when it came right down to it, luckily, like you said, the agent of the new buyers and the agent of the home that my people were buying the home, I knew them really well. And I kept them involved from the get-go and just said, this is where we're at and this is what's happened. And, I'll have to keep you up to date. And it was really cool. They were giving me advice and sending over broker information and talking to their attorneys to see, where we were at. All in all, honestly, from talking to attorneys and stuff, it was a case we would have won. It wasn't something that my seller would have been held to, but what it came down to is what was going to be, the least stress, the least amount of money to be put into attorneys and things like that. And the buyer could have pushed it out to where we couldn't have sold the home for some time until it went through the court proceedings and stuff like that. So yeah, I was lucky that the other agents were really understanding. But thank you. I appreciate that. It's kind of embarrassing sometimes we get ourselves in these situations, but I'll tell you what, that won't happen to me again. So another thing I just want to bring up is I do have these printouts. They're on your handout, and it basically is a breakdown of making sure that you don't end up in any kind of legal trouble. Ideas on things like bodily injury, snow removal, making sure that your property's the snow removal and everything is done. Toys and things are off the stairs and away from things. Sometimes we have to go in and clean up before buyers walk through. And then of course, key boxes, make sure that you're putting them in places. I'm glad that somebody brought this up earlier and said be careful where you put it. This is kind of exaggerated a bit, but it's really not in some ways, because the key box, if you see this, it says the agent's remarks. The showing instructions say, key box is located on the gas meter on the side of the home. Key only opens the back door. I mean, isn't that, how many times have you went on a listing to somebody's listing and you can't find the box, or it's just in the weirdest places and stuff like that. So anyway, protect yourself. If you don't have errors and omissions insurance, I strongly suggest you look into that. Make sure that, when you're doing your advertising, again, make sure that, you're doing it appropriately. These are some things I found that I kind of thought I would finish up with that I thought were funny. The agents that have had ads and things like that, don't get a divorce, just get a bigger house. This was back when the presidency, was all going on, and it was, Trump against Hillary, and somebody put moving to Canada, we can sell your home, kind of just funny stuff. But free pizza with the purchase of a house. These are pop-by gifts that we use with Buffini or whoever you want to use. Just fun things that you can use to do some advertising and stuff. So the last thing I want to bring up is we are going through so much, and this is just something that I think is really important as us as realtors, that sometimes we need to think about the people that we work with. The people I was just talking about, the other agents I worked with in that situation back then, it's been years ago, but when I was working with that, they were so genuine with me, and they were so caring. And you know what, looking into it back then, they were agents that were always like that in everything that they did in real estate. And I really respect them a lot. And so if I would have had this back then and thought about this back then, I would have done this. But basically what this is the NAR has a nominate a good neighbor. Their deadline is May 8th, so it's coming up really fast. If you happen to know a realtor in your area or somebody, you know, that you worked with before that's doing a fantastic job, and it doesn't have to be just with real estate, if they're impacting their communities and helping out with volunteer work, you know, nominate them for something like this. I think that it's important that we support each other. It doesn't matter if we're from the same company or not. It's really cool. They get recognized at the annual conventions, and they receive a $10,000 grant towards the charity of their choice. They get their expenses paid if they end up being able to go to, you know, all of the, yeah, awards things and stuff, the Good Neighbor Awards, when they go to the NAR conferences and stuff. Anyway, this is just, it's on there. If you think of somebody that's been doing, you know, something extraordinary that needs to be recognized, you know, please do things like that. I think it makes a big difference. So before we go, I see that I've lost a couple, but they probably figured they got their words, most of the words. Anyway, the last thing I want to give you is your last word, your code, and I want to give you directions. So the last thing is a phrase, and it's stop the spread. So it's going to have to do with the virus, of course. My little granddaughter gave me that one, and I thought it was cute that she would pick that out. What I need you to do now is, as soon as the class is over, I will need you to email me back at the EEE, 4 E's, educator is what it spells, at gmail.com. I need you to email me back all of your words that you wrote down during the class, so that I can give you your credits. If you miss more than 2 words, you won't get the credit. So, you know, be very careful. Make sure that you put down everything that you possibly can. And once I receive those, then I will go on and bank your credit hours within the next couple of days. I bank them, and then they will go over what's their bank. They go to the division. The division then banks them usually within about 5 days. I'm not sure with everything, they're working from home and stuff. I'm not sure if it's happening that fast, but I would imagine by the end of the month at least, you should get all of that. Okay, so I'm going to really quickly, someone's asking about my email address again. It's the same email address that I sent out the pamphlets and everything for the handouts this morning. And the, yep, there you go. Somebody's got it on there. You should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words. So make sure you send them over. So anyway, once you get those to me, I will get your certificates sent out to you as well. And then if you like the online classes, I can't promise that they're going to allow us to keep doing them this way, but I will be sending out evaluations. If you will fill those out and send them back, I show those to the division, and I'm hoping that if I get enough people to do that, we can end up keep doing some Zoom online classes like this, and it's really beneficial. I think that it helps people get their CE hours in without having to, you know, try to get their kids gone and all those things. But anyway, so like they said, you know, the saying goes, tough times don't last, but tough people do. To the real estate community, we're going to survive, and we're going to thrive, and we got this. So good luck to you guys. I hope that you got something out of this today that helps you in your personal life, your real estate life, and everything. If you want any of the forms or anything that I had on here, email me when you send the words back to me. Email what it is you want, and I will try to get those sent out to you by the end of the week. Otherwise, thanks so much. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we end the meeting? And you're welcome, you guys. Thank you so much for all the nice comments you're sending me. Okay, great. Well, thanks, you guys. Be safe out there and keep working. Don't give up yet, okay?
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.